Well, thank you very much. It's an honor for me to be here with you today and to share with you some of our research, some of our findings, and some of the ways that we've determined that will allow us to accelerate leadership in the 21st century. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to give us some context, some perspective, if you will, at how fast business is moving. So you'll see here that there's some everyday products and services that we're all familiar with. And I ask you this question: how long did it take, or how many years did it take to reach 50 million users of each one of these products that we use every day? First, the telephone. How long for 50 million users? Well, it took 75 years. Well, let's fast forward to television. Most of us are familiar with televisions. We have at least one, two in our homes and workplaces. It took 13 years to reach this threshold of 50 million users. Now, what about Facebook? This crazy product that two university students at Harvard developed in their dorm room with little resources, just an idea. It took 3.5 years to reach 50 million users. Can you get a sense for the acceleration of business in the world in which we live? Right now, as of the end of last year, Facebook has 1.86 billion active users. Started in a dorm room with two university students, and now Mark Zuckerberg's one of the most wealthy individuals in the world. Well, finally, we have a sophisticated product called Angry Birds. Now, I don't know if you have Angry Birds in this country, but I will tell you this: it's a silly little game. It's played on your iPhone or your phone or tablet, and it's a simple concept where you take a sling mechanism, and with your finger you launch birds into structures, and as they tumble in the structures, you get points. It sounds a bit ridiculous at some point. If you haven't played it, don't. Okay? It is highly addictive. I will tell you, it's highly addictive. How long, when Angry Birds introduced their space version, how long did it take to get 50 million users? 35 days. 35 days. Now there's a new record out there. It's this Pokemon Go phenomenon. Okay, Pokemon Go hit 50 million users in 19 days. So we live in a world of acceleration. And as leaders, we need to know and we need to have an ability to accelerate our own personal performance and the performance of others. And I want to introduce this concept. It's very simple, but it's very, if you apply it in your organizations, you'll see dramatic results. Here's the concept. You increase your emotional intelligence of your leaders, which it's a cause-effect relationship. It will increase the psychological safety, which will increase your career and business impact. Real simple. I want to walk you through each of these phases. I want to start at the end, begin with the end in mind, and then we'll work back to emotional intelligence. So let's, for a moment, to give us some perspective, and I want you to think in your minds, if you look at 2017 and you're looking at the career or business impact, let's talk about business impact. If you look at what you have to accomplish, what is the most important thing that you need to do as a leader or you need within your organization? Now, here's some examples. It could be safety performance, employee selection, leadership effectiveness, productivity, increased sales, increased profits. Maybe you're working on your brand. I want each of you, for yourselves, to think, what is that one thing? It may not be on this list, but I want you to have that in your mind or even take a note. So as we talk about these concepts, you can go back and say, if I do this, will I be able to increase my business impact? It's all about business results. We train for results. Okay? So let's start with this concept of psychological safety. Now, you may have heard this before. It's a shared belief that it's safe to discuss ideas, to take risk, to learn, to give feedback, to receive feedback. It's okay to to make mistakes. Okay? It's safe to collaborate. It's safe within our organization to challenge the status quo. Okay? That's psychological safety. Now, it's a fact that every one of us, we create a psychological zone around us. We may be aware of it, or we may not be aware of it. Well, what is this psychological zone that we create? It could be a very safe, warming, engaging zone, or it could be on the other end of the continuum, the spectrum. It could be a very unsafe zone. Every leader does this in the organization. Now, we look at the continuum and we say a very unsafe zone is a red zone. Okay? A safe zone is a blue zone. Let's talk about the red zone first. Now, when I go through this, immediately what will come to your mind is a leader that you worked with, because we all have worked with a red zone leader, and you'll start to identify the behavior of a red zone, an unsafe zone. This is a zone where it's not safe to discuss ideas. In fact, when you bring up ideas, sometimes you're immediately dismissed. Or, even worse, if you take a risk and you're trying to innovate and it fails, not only is that not tolerated within this organization, but people that fail will be punished or embarrassed. Okay, that's an unsafe zone. It's about self-preservation. It's about risk management. It's about pain avoidance. We talk a lot about employee engagement. What do you think the employee engagement is in a red zone? People engage in a red zone just enough to where they don't lose their job. Okay? They give just enough effort to keep their job. Who typically leaves a red zone? Is it your brightest and best talent? Yeah, because they don't want to tolerate it. We talk about a lot the younger worker versus the more seasoned worker. I will tell you that we call them millennials, but these younger workers, they will not hunker down and tolerate a red zone. They just won't. You've probably experienced that. If your company's having a lot of attrition with your younger workers, take a look at the psychological safety that you're creating within your organization, because they won't tolerate it. My generation, we tolerated it. We hunkered down and we just did it because that's what was expected. Well, let's contrast that now and let's talk about a blue zone. A blue zone, and I think we've all worked in a blue zone or for a blue zone leader, it's where we give our career best contribution. Okay? We engage in this concept called discretionary effort. And what is discretionary effort? Discretionary effort goes beyond the minimal effort to keep the job. Discretionary effort is what we give because we freely want to give that to the company. It's at our discretion to give that effort. Okay? It's not that you're working, from 8 hours a day, now I'm going to give 10 or 12. Discretionary effort is when I'm there, you're getting my very, very best. A blue zone is a zone of peak engagement. Okay? Now let's circle back around for just a moment, and I want you to go back to that business impact, that goal that you were thinking about just a few minutes ago. Are you going to be able to accomplish that goal better in a red zone or a blue zone? Okay? It's pretty obvious. You're going to be able to accomplish it more in a psychologically safe zone. Okay? So, I get asked all the time, Michael, can you be an 85% blue zone leader? Because I'm an 85% blue zone leader. Okay? Because I find that when there's a deadline and the pressure's on, I have to go red. Because I have to get things done. I have to step in and I have to control the situation, and I get things done, and then I go immediately blue. And to this leader and manager, I simply do this. I introduce him to my dog Dexter. This is my dog Dexter. It literally is my dog. And he loves sitting in his hammock. He's a crazy dog. He's a friendly, outgoing, lovable dog. We love to be around Dexter. My children love Dexter. The whole neighborhood loves Dexter. He'll be gone for days. He'll come back, and he'll be well fed and taken care of, and somebody will tell me they've taken care of Dexter this week for me. It's a wonderful thing. But let me just tell you this. How would you feel, or how would my friends, family, and neighbors feel about Dexter if just 10% of the time he would viciously bite you, just out of the blue? He'll be sitting in his hammock, he'll jump down, he'll bite you, and then jump back up in. How would you feel about Dexter? Well, let me tell you the behavior that would happen. You would be very cautious around Dexter. Would you ever trust Dexter? No, you wouldn't. He's lost all trust. Okay, it would be to the point where I would avoid the dog. I wouldn't want to embrace him because I never know when I'm going to get bit. All right, if we're a red zone leader 10% of the time, guess what? We're a red zone leader because our people and our teams will behave and interface with us as if we're red. All right, so I don't want you just to take my word for it. Google, which is a company I respect, I use their products every day. I travel throughout the world. Everybody uses Google. And they realize that the work that's going to be done in the 21st century is primarily going to be accomplished through teams. And so they went on a quest to determine, we want to find what constitutes the perfect team. And so they called this the Aristotle Project. Don't take my word for it, Google it, okay? They looked at 180 teams over 2 years, and they looked at every facet that you could possibly look at with a team. They looked at gender. Do female teams outperform male teams? What mix do we need to have? We looked at putting the brightest and the best together. We looked at putting those that were more social on the team versus introverts, extroverts. They looked at everything. Do you know what they found as the number one predictor of success of that team? No surprise to you, psychological safety. It was less important about how the actual team was composed, and it was more important for success of that team. It's the psychological safety. Does that make sense? So we love this study because it validated all of our research, and it validated our approach to accelerating leadership in the 21st century. All right, I want to give you one more example because I think this will give you a good context. In my spare time, I like to work with youth. I like to work with children and young adults. And I'll go in the classroom and I'll teach a concept. And what I find is when I work with I would say second, third graders, which would be 7th, 8th, 9-year-olds, I'll go in there and I'll teach something that I think is profound, that every child should know in their life to make them a better child. And then I'll ask a question. And without exception, every hand goes up. Sometimes both hands go up. And then my favorites, when they get this, pick me, pick me. And I'll call on that child. And you know what? They have forgotten the question. Okay? I don't know if it's the teacher or just the excitement, but they forgot the question. But you know what's amazing to me is they want to be part of the team. They want to engage. They have a passion for learning, and I love that. Now, contrast that when I go in and work with the older children, the ones that are in 11th and 12th grade, say 15, 16, 17-year-olds, and I'll, again, teach a profound topic. All my topics are profound. I will go in and I will teach them something that will change their life. Okay? I ask a question. You know what happens? 2 people. This is what I get. Okay? And what I notice the behavior is they close up, they hunker down, and you know what's going in through their head? Oh, don't pick me, don't pick me, don't pick me, don't pick me. So let me ask you, what happened from 2nd grade to 12th grade? It's directly correlated to psychological safety. These kids know the answer. I'll talk to them one-on-one. These are bright, outgoing children. They're our future. What's preventing them from speaking up? Well, over the years, they may have said the wrong answer. They may have been embarrassed by a teacher. They may have been teased by the other children. Okay? It's not a real safe zone by the time they get to high school. So let me ask you this to put it in context. You all have new employees. They come from university. They transfer from other companies. When somebody starts with your organization, they come in with the excitement and energy of my second and third graders, correct? They're excited to make a difference. So then I would ask you to think, what happens in a month, in a few months, in a year, in several years? Are they still as excited to make the contribution now than as they were when they first started with your organization? Think of you. Are you still as excited in your organization as you were the first week that you joined the company? Okay? This is a real thing. And what drives the excitement and the engagement is the psychological safety. Well, let's transition to the last topic that I want to share with you. It's on emotional intelligence. And I think at some level, that concept's been around for years. It really, if you looked at the definition of emotional intelligence, it really has two elements. It has an internal element, and it has an external. The internal is my ability to be self-aware and recognize how my thoughts, feelings, and behaviors influence others. The external is to be aware socially, not only to see how my thoughts, feelings, and behaviors can influence others, but how I can use the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors of others to influence the work that we do. Now, this is a key principle. I want you to really think about this. When it comes to internal and self, it's about control. Okay? We control ourselves. Good leaders do that. When it comes to others, it's about influence. And too many leaders get that wrong. They think they can control others. Have you ever worked for a micromanager? Right? That's somebody who doesn't understand this principle of leadership. It is not a pleasant experience. It typically is a red zone experience. We control ourselves, we influence others. And wrapped around this, and this is what's new in our research and our literature, is this concept of self-regard. It's the one skill that bridges both, the internal and the external. Because if we don't have, at some threshold level, high self-regard, it's difficult to influence others. So, why emotional intelligence and why today? Well, emotional intelligence is the conduit of influence within organizations. It's how we get things done. That's why Google's research came back and said emotional intelligence is the most important thing. Well, how do we develop psychological safety? How do we develop psychological safety? It's the collective emotional intelligence of your organization that has a direct effect on the psychological safety of your organization. So where do we start? The first thing that I think you need to do is understand the difference between a fixed trait and a learnable skill. Now, most behavioral scientists and psychologists will tell you that personality, our temperament, our disposition is a fixed trait, right? I've taken Myers-Briggs, DISC, throughout. I'm a great case study because I started years ago and I've probably taken that 10 times and it comes back every time. I'm an ENTJ. Okay? Same with DISC and other things. So personality is a fixed trait. The nice thing about emotional intelligence is it's a learnable skill. Okay? So I was working with a group yesterday and somebody came up to me and said, I'm 55, I just don't think I can change. Well, shame on you. You know? Of course you can change because we're talking about thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, right? So personality is great because it tells us who we are. Okay? Emotional intelligence tells us what? Who we can become. What's more important for a leader? It's more important that you understand who you can become because leadership is a process of what? Becoming. So where do we start? Well, we start with a self-assessment. I think all leaders should do that at some level. And you need to measure specifically the skills that influence your emotional intelligence. And we've broken it down into 5 key skills: self-regard, self-awareness, self-control, social perception, and then with all this, I have my social effectiveness. And then we break it down and we identify success factors. Of course, they're blue, right? And we identify those risk factors, which are red. So let's take a look at self-regard, for example. Self-regard is really comprised of 5 behaviors: optimism, self-respect, confidence, motivation, and independence. We measure those, we isolate them, and we measure those so that you can focus in on the key thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. We call them dimensions, and that's how you change your self-regard. So we don't really focus on the skills as much as we isolate and focus on the dimensions. And then, of course, we roll this out for all the skills and dimensions. This is our approach to it. If you don't use our approach, use an approach. Find some base level to where you can measure your emotional intelligence. And unlike personality, you should be measuring your emotional intelligence on a fairly regular basis because it changes. We get better. We get worse. When we get promoted, actually, as leaders, the higher up we go, traditionally, the lower our emotional intelligence can become because we're not getting the feedback, the candid, honest feedback that we used to get. So we start believing every thought that we have, which actually can be dangerous. Well, let me summarize today, and I hope this has been a good experience for you. I want to go back and talk about how we drive evolution in the future. We really need to, first of all, focus on our emotional intelligence. Then, from that emotional intelligence, we ought to look at what kind of psychological safety we're having in the organization. Now, I will tell you this. If you increase the leader's emotional intelligence, the team members and the employees will follow that lead. Okay? We learn behavior through modeling. So if we were around micromanagers our whole life, we tend to be micromanagers. So start with the leaders. Increase the psychological safety by increasing your emotional intelligence, and then link that to the career and business impact that your organization can have. I hope you've enjoyed this concept. I hope that every situation you're in right now, and it will happen, I hope you start looking around and say, that's a red zone leader. I just saw that. And look at the behavior and look at the results they're getting. I want you to sit there and say, we're in a blue zone meeting. It's been open. We've freely been able to discuss ideas. Or we're in a red zone meeting where it's kind of shut down. It's being driven by one person. I want you to see the world in red and blue from this point forward. And I want you to start looking at yourself because it begins with us. I want you to say, am I a red zone leader? Am I being red in this situation? Am I biting? You remember Dexter, right? Am I biting? Or am I a blue zone leader? I will tell you there's no single thing that you can do that will create impact for you as a leader than to understand this concept of psychological safety and how you can create that within your organization. There's nothing in our research that we've found that increases the performance, the creativity, the innovation, the competitive advantage of an organization than an organization with high psychological safety. Competing in the market, the company with high psychological safety over time in their organization will crush those companies with low psychological safety. So it's been wonderful to be with you here today. I hope this is something you can immediately apply into your life, and I hope this is something that you can apply into your company. Let's focus on creating and generating higher levels of psychological safety. Thank you very much.
Michael, since a few months that we are partnering together regarding BlueEQ, I've talked to a lot of the clients I've met. Some of them are represented here in this room. And some questions are coming all the time about BlueEQ, psychology, safety, and so on. And I would like to ask you those questions in order to share the answers with all the others that are our guests today. The first one is, how is received BlueEQ in a multinational environment, in different cultures, and in the countries you already are with this product in this moment?
That's a great question. Right now, I would say we've taught our program and our approach in probably to leaders in 60 different countries. And we find that psychological safety is a universal correct principle. And so regardless of the culture, it applies. It applies. And so, yes, it is very applicable.
Another question that comes often, it's how is different BlueEQ concept from the emotional intelligence we were talking 5 or 10 years ago?
That, 5 or 10 years ago, even emotional intelligence has been around for a long time. And when they first came out, and Daniel Goleman came out with his book, and the researchers, he synthesized the research that was there. And they really did a wonderful job at creating a self-awareness and an acknowledgement of emotional intelligence. And it started defining the importance of that in the literature. I think where they fell short was in the application. So everybody knew that they should have it, and it made sense because it's a universal principle, but they really didn't have a plan to apply it. And frankly, in the last 2 or 3 years, and even Google would support this in their research and others, it's this concept of psychological safety. So high EQ produces higher levels of psychological safety. And now what's different is we can directly link that to business impact.
And now the last question, it's about, something that everyone is interested, return of investment. What kind of success can expect an organization after 60 or 90 days of applying BlueEQ system?
Yeah, excellent. I'm an economist by nature, by training, and it's all about the numbers for me. It has to be quantitative. And so, our approach is we start with a baseline. And what we find is we like to reassess after 60 to 90 days. And what we typically find is that people increase their emotional intelligence across the board about 6 to 10% in that time period, because they start to see the benefits of doing it, and that provides greater motivation, and it creates a sustainable behavioral change. And then what we also do is we look at summation of the organization, and we measure that. And so we take every individual assessment, we roll it up into a summary of that, an aggregate report, and we typically find the same increase across the board, about a 6 to 10% in 90 days. That's huge when you start looking at the impact that you can have. The other thing that we do is we like to measure the degree of psychological safety an organization has at various times. And we find that we have statistically, we have established the correlation between emotional intelligence and psychological safety. So that's something that we're constantly measuring. I think that's all the questions. Was there anything else, Florin? All right. Thank you very much. It's been wonderful to be with you.